All right, well, we are back for another exciting episode of the Awkward Watersport Guys podcast. And on today's show, we have Maya Schilder, CEO, founder of Onboarding Consulting. Maya, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And we are going to be talking about SB606 and also another law that is coming down the pipe, potentially SB30, that you might want to know about. And of course, we have the co-host with the most, Kevin O'Neill.
I love that in 3 years, like when we were so much better than when we first got started, that things are still so awkward around here, man.
Well, you didn't like that intro?
Loved it. I loved it.
Okay,
Co-host with the Mo.
If it makes you guys feel any better, I feel totally awkward.
How unoriginal was that co-host with the most?
If you'd have said Mo, if you'd have said Mo-ost, it would have been better.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm excited. This is a spoiler alert. This is our second run at trying to intro this show. And in the earlier version of it, we learned that area code 606 is in the beautiful state of Kentucky.
Yep.
Next time I visit Detroit, I won't even fucking drive through Kentucky. But
Kevin will now avoid that state forever.
More like SB606.
So,
Maya, send us 606. Tell us all about this lovely bill.
Well, before we get into that, the last show we had Maya on, she got literally like 4 words in the entire time because between Adam, Botana, and Kevin, it was like, hogging all the airwaves basically. So, Maya, tell us a little about you and onboarding consulting and your journey into water sports.
I've been working with water sports for about 10 years. I managed a GM of a water sports company in Destin. And I'm currently now working as a operations manager for a marina and trying to get a different perspective on the water sports industry from that job now. I started onboard consulting last fall because I saw the need of so many upstart liveries who really had no clue of what they were doing at all. And working in the marina industry now, I see it even more. It's almost painful to hear at times how little people are educated on the industry. So I help people get established in documentation, walking through the steps with FWC, legal referrals, insurance referrals, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, it's a much needed service, I think, in the industry. We know that just looking in the Facebook group, all the questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of private messages from comments I make on there. So there's definitely a need to have everybody educated as those of us who have been in the industry for as long as we have, especially if we're trying to make this industry as safe as possible and and I hate to use this word, but as legitimate as possible, because when you have all of these people out here who are doing it in such a rogue, and some of it's not really their fault, they just don't know. They really don't know the process to go through it. It's not like you're opening a store. There's, we know, those of us involved in it know that we are, overseen by 3 different law enforcement agencies. I mean, FWC in Florida, FWC, Coast Guard, and your local sheriff's office. So, I mean, there's municipal regulations, there's state regulations, there's U.S. federal regulations. It's a pretty complicated mess.
Hey, and if you're in the Gulf National Seashore, you might have Dewey, the fucking park ranger, roll up on you and tell you how.
Yeah.
God, get a load of that guy up there, man. When whatever.
Yep.
You guys, it's an inside joke, but we have National Park Service, and they got one boat for about 700 miles of seashore, and the guy was up there, giving us the
very proud of that boat.
Yeah, giving us the hard line on Crab Island. So. And if you're up here in our area, we have, and that's just on the water. We have three different. We have about 10 miles long going down 98 between 3 different cities. We have 3 separate ordinances from City of Destin, Okaloosa County, and City of Fort Walton Beach. I feel like it's just like, man, where you at, Mary Esther?
It's
Don't give
coming.
me ideas. Don't
Yeah.
give me any ideas.
So Maya, we had you on last show with House Rep Adam Botana. We talked about SB606 and we questioned Adam with a few things. Some answers we didn't necessarily get. We still don't have those answers today, but it's been like maybe 6 months since we had that show. So let's kind of fast forward to today. What has changed with SB606 as far as the enforcement or just the law in general?
Well, the law is now the law. There's no more educational period with the FWC. So anybody who is operating needs to assume that they are going to be checked this year. So you do need to have all of your documentation correct and processed in time. I do believe that FWC state office is processing the permits that you're required to have fairly quickly. There is a little bit of a legal snafu that they're researching right now, and I'm waiting on an answer about that regarding some of the secondary insurance that's being put out there. But in right now, I think that they are processing applications pretty quick, but there is no educational period anymore, and there are fines and there are penalties. So there's no more kind of, you can't say you didn't know. It went into law. It went into effect in 2022. So there's no more saying I didn't know about it.
A lot of them still don't know. A lot of them still don't know. And so I'm gonna play a little bit of like a devil's advocate here. I'm gonna get on my livery feels.
Here we go.
How many times have you seen FWC pull over a parasail boat for flying in above 17 knot sustained winds?
I usually see Coast Guard affect that, but I
And
mean,
no,
I'm sure.
FWC, that's state. So FWC is actually responsible for that. They didn't want that bill enacted because they were like, how the hell do we monitor this? When you look at wind, and this is like a side note, but I'm gonna circle back to my point on this, and then I'm gonna go right back into being on the normal people side again, not the ignorant livery operators. But the problem with all of this stuff is, and I've had the unique experience to talk a ton with FWC about 606. And so when I ask that question, it's because FWC is like, well, we don't know how to pull over a parasail boat, or like we don't, 17 sustained, like who's measuring that? Are you measuring it from the boat? Are you measuring it from the airport? Are you measuring it from online wind? Like you can be in 10 different spots in 100 square feet and get 10 different readings on the water.
Yeah, you could be in different places on the bay.
100%, or up in the air, like 10 meters off the water, the wind it's a different reading than it is on the water. So my point to this is when Florida State put this law through, the reason FWC was not a fan of it, because they're like, how are we going to enforce it? So there's a little bit, I think, of an enforcement issue here when there's still a lot of ambiguity. Like I went and just got clarification with Officer Nick Carade, who's head of Florida Division Boat and Waterways, for my company personally. I'm just like, hey, here's my binder, like here's my thing, like I'm good, right? Just between you and me, yeah, you're good. But I think the issue is that they've changed the attestation form multiple times now, and they're still rubber stamping livery operators and giving them permits who aren't necessarily offering supplemental insurance or have the renter coverage. And what's going to happen in a livery inspection by FWC when I pull out a 90-page binder and he's just like, where's your general liability? And I'm going to like, here you go, dude. Here's my Bible. Go have fun. Go read that. And FWC is like, has parroted that back, where they're like, it's not that the law doesn't have any teeth. It's that it's still so ambiguous, and still like, yeah. I mean, we're kind of getting our head wrapped around it as like, okay, but even the insurance companies are like, this is still like, okay, and the renter, but you have to have supplemental. And what's going to happen when this is going to just play out in a court. right? Someone's going to get hurt, and then it's going to get played out of court. Then we're all going to really know what, you know what I mean? It's just like, I'm not a lawyer, obviously, in case you were wondering. If you're listening to this,
just
but,
let
me finish my thought.
Okay.
Let me finish my thought. And it's this, is that, is this going to establish, do we have to wait to establish precedents until something happens? That's my question.
No, I don't think so. But look, I feel bad for FWC personally. This was trash legislation that they were dumped in their lap with zero guidance on how to implement, on how to enforce, on how to set up a system for a policy. I mean, they just got legislation. So I feel terrible for the people in Tallahassee and for the officers on the ground, because they're running this blind, and it sucks for them. But they have been given a directive, and because they've been given that directive, they are going to have to start following through on it. I don't think that, when we had our safety meeting, our county safety meeting, I don't think that they got up there and were saying that they were going to start enforcing just to say they were going to start enforcing. I do feel like enforcement is different in different areas of Florida, and that's the story I've gotten from a lot of people. I've gotten from a lot of operators that in some areas it's very harsh, in some areas it's very lackadaisical. So, but that has been also during what was supposed to be an education period. And since we're out of that now, I don't know if it's kind of out of their control, and they're going to have to move forward with actually enforcing it. When you talk about something bad happening, that's when something's going to really push the issue. I do think that's probably going to be one of the things, because I think that the test of some of these secondary insurance policies is going to be a real problem when they get put to the test of an untested product. I think that that's going to be a real problem for the market as a whole, because their products have not been tested. This is basically like rental car insurance for pontoon boats and jet skis, and that's not the same kind of market for rental cars. So
I think
that's when we're going to have issues, is when there is a serious accident and somebody does have some legal issues.
Right, because the first thing that's going to fucking happen, right, is somebody's not going to try and pay. That's exactly what's going to happen. Like, this is always the case. It's always like, when something really bad happens, when somebody's going after above $1 million, and when it starts to get into this, well, were you actually abiding by the rules of the policy? Right. So, and it's like the policy versus the law is sort of like with the going back to the parasail example, at least the parasail law and the parasail insurance requirements were together. It's like the reading of the insurance policy is the reading of the law. But if you have, let's say, and the renter coverage, and something happens and they don't, and whatever, the insurance company was going to take care of me, but wants to fight the renter because the renter was drunk or whatever it may be. And they're going to say, hey, we're not going to cover you. And then that renter is going to go, well, why didn't you offer me the insurance? They're going to go, we didn't have to because it was the renter. And then the renter's going to sue me. Like, it's a whole big kind of clusterfuck if you're not offering, because there's two different options in the legislation, and neither one of them technically work.
So, and what I will say is, legislators are not insurance professionals, and when they wrote this bill, I don't think that they spoke with people in the insurance commission. I mean, I perhaps I'm wrong, but that's where I feel like we are at now, where somebody with the insurance commission really needs to step in and give guidance to FWC, because I don't know that FWC has insurance professionals and that can give the correct guidance of what these products are really capable of fulfilling should something happen.
I always feel like, and there's 100% tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, but I feel like insurance companies had something to do with this law. It always feels like, and it feels like it's very difficult for us, but it's so easy on the platforms that a caveman could do it. Wink,
Well,
wink.
well,
Because
I
it
will
seems to
say,
work for the big platforms and those massive carriers where like so like I can't go get commercial insurance from Geico, but Boat Setter can. And so it's like I always, and it's not been a rub for them. They're just like, here, we're the livery, here's the insurance. Like, I mean, again, I don't think anybody was like, there's any backdoor deals for boating or whatever. It's like easy to kind of go to that and feel like, oh man, we got good old Boyd on this whole thing. And I truly don't think that that's what happened. But I mean, to be honest, like shout out Senator Garcia. I'd love to have you on this show because I feel like she was the chief architect behind this. And I just want to
right.
kind of know that, like, well, where did this whole portion of this come from? And how does it make a more safer boating environment?
Unfortunately, it doesn't. I mean, this legislation really doesn't do anything for safety. It does something for insurance companies, and it causes a lot of headache for operators and for the FWC. It doesn't change one thing about safety. There was no real safety legislation that was added to this that changed anything.
But as we like, I want to rewind that what you said. Like, it doesn't benefit it. Did you say it does or it doesn't benefit insurance?
Well, it's going to benefit the second party companies that have, can sell policies there. It'll benefit
Yeah,
them.
I, I, I don't think, I think those are both like startup companies and, like, again, tinfoil hat, like I think maybe there was like, oh, they're seeing this thing come down the pipe and, they're probably like, oh, there's an opportunity here. But I don't, are those companies getting benefited? I don't know. I think that I think it's probably been a struggle for them as well. I have not heard of any companies necessarily selling a lot of these policies. So
They aren't selling a ton, but they have secondary products that go along with it. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think that either of them got into the market thinking that they were going to go broke.
sure.
So, and they have connections to other platforms as well. So, I mean, Bowie has connections to other platforms. So
Mhm.
it kind of benefits that.
So let's break down the issues with SB606. And what I was going to say earlier was like, just to do a recap of 606. But if you have listened to our previous two shows, that will give you all you need to know about SB606. So we're not going to give an explanation of what it is. If you're listening to the show, you know what SB606 is. So what are some of the main sticking points right now, Maya, with SB6? Like, where is all the confusion? Is it the and the renter? Is it the
It's the and the
qualification?
renter.
Okay.
It's the and the renter. It's the insurance of, of obtaining insurance now that covers and the renter, or now it's just made it very difficult to get insurance, period, in the state of Florida.
Yep.
So if you can get one, if you can get a policy, it's caused rates to skyrocket in the state. And then the and the renter coverage, the problem with the and the renter coverage, and look, I'm all for commerce and all that kind of stuff, but the implementation of the and the renter coverage is very challenging for especially large scale operators. You have to utilize their technology as far as checking in, checking out equipment.
Not the and the renter. You mean the supplemental.
The
If you're covered
supplemental,
with
yes,
and the renter, everything's
yes,
business as
correct.
usual.
You're right. The supplemental. So if you are
Gotcha.
using one of the supplemental products, there is a massive problem with integration trying to make that work if you have a large scale business. If you try to think of having, for jet skis, for instance, those are often 1 hour rentals and you are turning and burning and you are getting them on the dock, fueling, and then getting them off. If you are having to add a 10 to 15-minute video digital process, checking in, checking out on a cell phone or on an iPad added to
Mhm.
each one of those rentals, you are losing money. I mean, it's just straight out. You are losing rentals each day on that. And um, I feel, I mean, I would say those are probably the two biggest issues. And then I just think the confusion, there's not been clear direction until just recently from the FWC. Last year's direction was kind of ambiguous, and it was send us this and we'll get you, we'll send you your permit. I know a lot of people I'm talking to now got permits with not full packages really. I mean, when I'm getting their documentation now, I'm like, how did you even get that? So I think the 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 not clear path on how to obtain your permit, now that has changed a little bit recently. I think that's cleared up some. I think they have been more direct, but those would probably be the biggest issues I see. And none of us really want to change our processes if we have an established business. If you're a new business, you think it's just part of the process. But those of us who have been in business for 10, 15 years, we have processes that work. And when we have to add a new step to that, that could be a very large business disruption.
Yeah. So here's my biggest problem with 606 as it stands is when so if your insurance does not cover the renter and someone checks in and they go, so remember, in order for them to decline the supplemental insurance, they have to get a bindable price. Okay. So someone comes to rent, they go through the onboarding process to get a quote from the supplemental insurance company. They get denied for that quote because of a DUI in the past 5 years or whatever. They get denied. At that point, can the rental company say, okay, we'll just say that you don't want you got denied, so you just decline the insurance. Can you still rent to that person? And the FWC told me, so the statute says no, you can't rent to them. I thought that FWC said they didn't know.
I mean, well, if you read the statute, by statute, it says no. It says that you have to have a bindable price. They have to have a bindable price to decline it. And if they don't decline it with a bindable price, they're not declining anything because they don't have a bindable price to insert there.
So that makes sense. So if your renter gets declined for that supplemental insurance, then they cannot rent. So you're telling me someone can make a reservation for July 4th weekend. They show up, they go through that process at your dock, they get declined, and then you can't resell that because it's last minute. You just lose out on,
yeah. And that is how it was, unless they can provide another driver who could be accepted.
Well, all right. So I'm going right back to devil's advocate again. So I got to ask the question, like, do we think that this is a part of the problem with our industry? Is that we know people are going out, we know they're drinking on our boats, maybe jet skis, depending on what you got going on. Well, my question is do you want to rent to someone who's got a known history of who feels they can get behind the vehicle of a motor vehicle and drive, and where boating is a little bit more let's just say that it's more common to have a few drinks to go out. You're not like, hey guys, like, let's have a few drinks and go for a fucking car ride. You're like, oh, we better not do this, right? Because there's a lot of teeth behind that. That if you go out and have a few drinks and go for a drive in your car, you get pulled over and go to jail. But when it comes to boating has had historically this kind of laissez-faire approach to, oh, it's okay to have a few drinks and go out there and drive. Technically, you can have a .08 and run a jet ski for the first time and fucking go drive a jet ski. I have a zero tolerance policy at our location for drinking and driving jet skis. 0.00 is my personal, even though they can legally have a couple drinks. And I've caught hell. I've gotten bad reviews from people because I wouldn't rent to them because they came out with a beer in their hand. They were getting on jet skis. I was like, absolutely not, dude. So my question as an industry, if somebody has a history of BUI, and SB30 is addressing this with wanting to put them through mandatory education if they have, I believe it's 2 or more criminal infractions. I haven't read the thing before we got on the show, but they want to give them mandatory education.
Mm-hmm.
If they've been drinking, if they had infractions on a boat, but it's like if the guy's getting on the boat and he's got a DUI and he kind of feels like, I can have a few drinks and drive a boat. Like, is this a problem? Are we as an industry? Like, I mean, that I have to get behind a little bit. Like, yeah, it sucks. Like, I'm going to lose a $300 boat, but I've done it before. And I'd do it again. If I feel like somebody, and I don't know their history, but if I feel like there's a chance they're getting on a boat with a whole box of liquor and everybody in that party's fucking throwing down, then, I mean, like,
let's take a different scenario. Let's say that you're 18 and you do something stupid. You get, a DUI or DWI. 5 years later, you're cleaned up, the difference between 18 and 24 is pretty significant for most people. So you're 24, you're on vacation with your wife and you go to run a boat and you get declined for something that happened 5 years ago and you're cleaned up. Or even worse, let's say that you have a family on there and it's, that they got their kids and it's just and then they get declined. It's I don't know.
I feel like if you paid your debt to society, you've paid your debt to society. And
exactly, yeah.
And if you're going to have, it's up to the business's discretion to, like you said, you have a zero tolerance policy. We had zero tolerance policies. You had to have a designated driver on board for the vessel. We always cautioned everyone at the window and at check-in, it is a zero tolerance. You cannot drink and drive. You will get arrested. There are DUIs, just like a DUI. We gave them all of that information. But if somebody has paid their debt to society, they've gone through all the motions of getting everything done, and they've turned around and they're coming out to have a good day with their family after 3 years of going through all of that, I don't feel like it's an insurance company's job to make an arbitrary decision about that. I feel like it's the company's job to make that arbitrary, or not arbitrary, but that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And we're leaving it up to a third party to make that decision about a customer before they even get to us. If it is on an online platform, if the second party insurance is on an online platform and your customer puts in the information and they get declined, they will never be your customer because they will get declined and they will be told they cannot drive the vessel. So I feel like it's not really appropriate for them to make that decision. It's you to make that decision, Kevin. You make that decision before the insurance company gets that opportunity to, because they're stopping people from coming to your door. They have the potential ability, if you are utilizing the second party and it is on your website and the customer is declined, they have the potential to stop a customer before they make it to your door.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I think the industry had a long time to get its act together, and I think we, and I'm probably going to catch hell for this one too from a lot of my peers. But I had a pretty strong philosophy about not allowing people under 18 to operate my jet skis. Well, guess what? A lot of insurance companies have moved that way. I mean, I get it that if you're 14, you can ride a jet ski in the state of Florida. And again, this is fucking weird legislation. This is where the 1988 date thing came in, right? They made it so kids could operate boats and jet skis. But the problem is that, and again, you look at the data, there's not overwhelming evidence to support that 16-year and 17-year-olds are getting into accidents. But I've always been like, man, fucking 16 years old on a fucking jet ski, like from Florida or from the shores of North Florida, our 16-year-olds are a lot different. They grew up on this water. They get it. A 16-year-old from fucking, wherever, fucking Houston, Texas, or Detroit, Michigan, does not have the same respect and the same pedigree of being on the water that Floridians do. So this is where it's like, all right, a kid from Florida driving a jet ski at 16 is a little bit different, you know what I mean? Like, for the most part. And so this is where things kind of get tricky, right? Because this whole industry was kind of founded on like, oh, that's cool, I'm going to start a business on this. Like, I've talked to parasail captains, like, you know what, man? This business got lame when we stopped being able to have a beer with the customer. Like, this is the way this industry was started, man. Guys on beaches with jet skis and girls in bikini in the 80s. And so, like, the industry had, and again, it was just, it was not rogue, but it was just like, these like, surf guys, water sport guys were just like, this is fun and this is cool. And we're not really historically known for following a set of rules too well. We're like an industry found on beg for forgiveness, don't ask for permission. And the thing is just, it's blown up, right? And you could put that on platforms too, because platforms are not like, yeah, it's like the Airbnb of fucking jet skis. Like, what? And so now you see that, and then you see companies getting into it that are doing that, and they're like, man, I'm gonna get 8 skis. Well, now instead of just being a platform, I'm gonna do direct to consumer and get my own website. And it's like, well, what's your experience? well, I bought a couple jet skis from my local Yamaha dealership, right? So it's like if we had some type of training, if we had some type of, you know, if we had some type of food handlers like permitting, or we went through like captain's training, like there's very few of us in this industry that have the level of being on the boat, being on the water, that are original native Floridians. That's not even me. I just started in the game a long time ago. But you know, my whole point being is and Maya, you know for how many out of towners came to Destin, Florida and started businesses and
Mhm.
did not have that pedigree, did not have those years of experience from recreational boating to the commercial side of working in water sports for many years before they started. They just bought a couple of jet skis, bought a few boats. I mean, I know guys that have like, you know, invested and bought a parasail boat and hired some knucklehead off of Craigslist or whatever to come run it for them. Like there's been very little oversight in our industry as a whole for many, many, many years. And because of that, there's been a lot of accidents. There's been just a lot of shenanigans. 21 and 22 was the height of all of it because of COVID, and government rushed to legislation on 9 different levels. Insurance companies scrambled to keep up with the amount of lawsuits that are coming through the door because Florida has terrible liability, terrible tort laws on the books
We
where
need
they
tort
just pay,
reform.
pay everyone.
We
And it's
definitely
like,
need tort reform.
so it's an amalgam and a coalescing of a perfect storm of events. And like, and I'm not gonna, I can't blame Garcia or Adam or insurance companies. Like the onus of responsibility at the end of the day falls on us. I'm a firm believer in that. It all starts with us. Like at the end of the day, if something happens at Destiny Water Adventures, it's my fault. I could have done something to prevent a tragedy, an accident. And I think we saw that firsthand when we all got together rather than letting moratoriums and the city of Destin fucking get together on their charter fishing boats and decide what was best for water sports or decides what was best for the community as it pertains to water sports. When we got together, we started enacting and affecting change and being involved in the process. But I just think, unfortunately, it was too little, too late. Like SB606 was all being rolled out. Like I called John, like I was like, "Hey man, have you seen this thing?" It was like a news. I'm like SB606, and he was like, "No, I haven't even heard of it." And John was involved directly in, I mean, with the state liaison of safety. I mean, I think he was just voted in, but even he was in on the dark on it. So it just, I think it just, I don't even necessarily think it's a bad piece of legislation. I think it was an uninformed piece of legislation. As far as the insurance companies go, I don't think any of them are truly benefiting. And I honestly feel like most of the insurance companies that are offering these, or both of the supplemental insurance companies, don't operate inside of a vacuum inside of Florida. This is one state, one market, and one product for them. And having talks with both of those companies, I can tell you that neither one of them are going to the bank with bags of cash. They're like as exasperated about this whole thing as everybody else is. And honestly, both have confided like, man, I'd like to set Florida on fire and walk away because it's been incredibly challenging for them, as well as legacy general liability insurance providers that are trying to deal with this as well. So I think it's just a mess.
It is a mess. I agree. I don't disagree with the fact that it's a mess. And I have spoken with them as well. And no, they're not running to the bank yet with bags of cash. However, you do have to think about the fact that this is relatively new, and because it wasn't enforced, people weren't signing up. So now that it's going to be enforced, their hands being forced a little bit on it. So I do foresee that they're going to have a few more customers in the next year, this year, next year. Because they're to fulfill the requirement for FWC, you have to sign up.
But I want to say this though. But if the product is bad and it makes it cumbersome and ineffective, right? And so we all know what that means from a sales perspective, right? If it's problematic, it's going to be hard to get. It's not like there's still and the renter coverage out there, so it's not like they're forced to go sign up with these. And if it makes
not
it
a lot
cumbersome,
of and the renter coverage out there though. That's the issue. There's not a lot.
There is for just boats.
Yeah,
if you're just renting boats, it's fine. But if you're doing PWCs, that's the problem.
PWCs are the
options.
issue.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of operators out there who are renting PWCs, and that becomes the option. And for PWCs, inclusive, and Kevin, this very often, if you have a fleet of skis and you combine that with pontoons, and if you happen to run parasail, you don't get to pick and choose who your insurance companies are. You are usually bound under one umbrella. So those have dwindled in the state, dwindled. So.
Yeah, and so you got to keep in mind too that very large scale operators, like there's the general market and then there's specialty. There's operators in South Florida that have insurance companies that aren't like going out and writing. Like some fleets are very specific, right? So a Lloyd's of London product, they might not want to deal with customer X, Y, or Z that has X amount of skis, X amount of pontoons, but they're willing to take on something smaller, just getting started, what have you, versus a different operator that has a whole vast fleet of not just boats and jet skis, and they're a massive operator that they're willing to take on for a $200,000 or $300,000 policy, and they're not writing for the general public at large. They're writing a specific product for a specific company. So this is, I think it's very nuanced. And I think the whole industry has been nuanced from market to market. And what happened is there was like a sort of like this very reactionary approach to everyone, right? Because like every operator is sort of different. Every operator's needs are sort of different. And depending on like history, length of time in the business, where you're located, how much shit you have, what kind of shit you have, different engine types, different ski types. Like I haven't heard of any operators yet that are being forced into, I mean, there's been a couple, right? There's been a couple I've heard of that have been forced to work with these supplemental carriers. As you said, to your point, until we see like regulation, adoption, and things start to happen, I also think that these companies aren't going like, oh, well, we're just going to make this really hard. An underwriting, like a jet ski, let's say, now I don't know if this has changed, but I've heard like, oh man, like somebody got quoted like $100 on an $80 jet ski rental. Like there's no way that converts. So that business model for those companies doesn't work unless there's an adjustment made or unless they offer a different product in the marketplace, which is going to happen. That's exactly what's going to happen. Those companies are going to offer general liability because no one's taking them up on $100 for a jet ski rental or a 30% increase to cart for a boat rental. I don't think a ton of people are buying $150 insurance product even on a $400 boat. So I think those things are this is going to adapt and change. I don't think the market for either one of industries, whether it be insurance or for water sports in the state of Florida, I don't think it's going anywhere.
So we're kind of getting to the end of the show. Let's talk about SB30 because that's something interesting that has made its way through, I think it's the Senate, Maya, or the House?
It's only in the Senate right now. Okay. It doesn't have a companion bill as of yet. And it's primarily focused on voter education and then penalties, like Kevin said, for people who do have accidents. One of the, it's hard to fight against education. So, I don't have a ton of issues with it. I do want to make sure that the language sticks with the driver of the vessel and not the owner of the vessel. If there is an incident, that's the only way that I would see that it would have any effect for liveries.
Can you go back and talk about why they're why this is even a consideration?
Kevin's probably better at that since he's the boat test guy.
I'm not like, yeah, it's funny. I'm not, and as I get older, I try to get more balanced on this stuff. So you guys are probably both like, what, Kevin? Like, you want to, but doing the business to business thing, and it's kind of forced me to like see through the eyes of like everybody involved, right? And so like for me personally, if they mandated education for there's 1.1 million boats in the state of Florida, right? and there's like an average of between 65 and 80,000 lifetime issuances a year. So, I mean, I can't tell you how many boat owners don't have the license, but for me personally, I would benefit greatly if that happened. I think the general boating populace in the state of Florida would probably be against that, because you do have guys that are like, oh, I've been operating boats for 30 years. There's a livery Kevin who goes, like, oh man, that's crazy. Because when I look at the pie chart of accidents, like, you're the one responsible. You're the overconfident, overzealous guy who's like, oh, I've been doing this 30 years. And I'm like, yeah, and you got like 75 hours underneath your belt, dude. Fucking relax, Skippy. Maybe you need to take the test. Maybe you need some education. And then there's delivery operators who say, and I'm one of them, that a paper test or an online test is never going to replace your dock hands, and it's never going to replace the safety measures and education, that the eye-to-eye conversation that you're having with your operator before they get behind the wheel of your boat. That's never going to replace by an online test. And this is coming from a guy who sells it. So, but at the same point in time, I'm also the same guy who wrote his own study guide, because there was not a study guide provided to me by FWC when I started offering the test as a livery professional. So the delta in between those two things has got to be filled with something, right? And if they were to legislate for livery operators to offer the TC to their customers, I personally wouldn't have a problem with that. Like, I mean, I professionally wouldn't have a problem with that. Even taking away the fact that I run a boat testing platform, like, I've never had a problem with giving people the test or sitting down and having that conversation with them. So when they come a little pre-educated and a little bit, they have some idea, rather than just the old paper test where it's like, oh, here's the answers. Read all the answers and then take the test and try to memorize them, which is what a lot of operators did. And look, I've seen a lot of operators that have put together a great study guide, because I'm not the only one to have written a study guide. Other operators have done that as well. And so I'm always on the side of education, but I'm also on the side of operators. Like, if at the end of the day, operators feel as though like that would hurt their business, then it'd be hard for me to like disagree with that, even though at the same point in time, operators think a lot of things sometimes when they're wrong, So it's a hard one for me to touch,
This might be unpopular opinion, but I think everybody should take the lifetime boaters test. I mean, just
my accountant agrees with you.
To assume, but the thing is, like, to assume that, boating is different than driving on the roads is crazy. Honestly, like, especially if you're boating in the destined area where it's crazy, you should know the signs, you should know the waterways, the rules of the waters. Everybody and you can do it online. It's not like you have to go to a driver's ed and go to the DMV. Like, you can go online, pay $30-$40, take the lifetime, and then that's one time, you're done.
In Alabama, they do it in high school.
Yeah, everybody in Florida should have boaters education. And I'll stick to that. It just makes sense. If you're going to drive a car, then and get a driver's license, you should get the same for a boat. It doesn't matter.
So look at now. Listen to this. Now, I had somebody pose this to me the other day, and she just made me like, I couldn't say anything. But she's like, "Hey, if you drive a car, you have to have insurance." And I was like,
But if you own a boat in the state of Florida and drive a boat, you're not required by statute to have insurance.
Right, but so then the argument is then why should anybody have insurance then? Like, why should I mean, if we're, and look, man,
I'm not against operators having to have liability. I mean, we have to have liability. We're operating a business, but I do think we need tort reform in the state. But on the subject of SB 30, interestingly enough, if you do a deep dive on the Senate website, which is the weirdest thing that I like to do, the biggest pushback they're having right now is from the financial office about how much it would cost to print the wheel on the driver's licenses. That's one of the biggest pushbacks right now.
I will subsidize that for them.
That's one of the biggest pushbacks they're having. But it was one of the financial reports on it. But it currently doesn't have a companion bill, so I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
The wheel, you're talking about on your
driver's license. So they don't have to issue a physical card.
Yeah, it would just be on your ID. It'll be on your driver's license. And
so you take your driver's license in to the DMV and then they stamp it?
No, you would get a new driver's license and it will have the little stamp on it. But the cost of that is, I mean, there's a breakdown on what it would cost, and it's one of the pushbacks on it. It's one of the financial pushbacks.
Just add a few dollars to the lifetime test and then to pay for it.
Yeah. Well, that's actually one of the things that they're talking about.
I'll print that mug out and send it to them, dude. You know what I mean? I'll be at home with some crayons and a piece of paper. John T. Smith has got a Florida license.
The only other part of the legislation that I said that I wasn't crazy about is the part about fines and penalties, and if you get in, or for people who have accidents. And the language is talking about the owner of the vessel. Some of the language talks about the owner. That has to go to the driver of the vessel.
Got it.
So that's my only concern.
There's
no companion for the, right, which means nobody in the house has picked it up to sponsor it. So if nobody picks it up, there's been no movement on it since January.
Yeah. Here's the rub on all of that, right? And this is where I mean about, like, we have an opportunity. So no matter what side of you fall on this, right? If you fall on the side of, and I had an opportunity, I think it would be terrible if they made everybody take the temporary test and no one would rent a jet ski from you, dude. It's like, if you don't want it, if you're against it, then, like, as an industry, you have a responsibility to make sure you're doing everything that you can, that if somebody seems wobbly on that ski, if they seem like they are not understanding what it has been laid down to them to get behind the wheel of that vessel, it is incumbent upon you to make sure that person is educated. I don't care if it's an online test. I don't care if it's your dockhand. I don't care if your grandma comes down there and spins her yarns about how she used to fucking operate rowboats on the inland fucking whatever. But you better make damn sure that operator knows what the fuck they are doing. Or guess what? The government is going to come in and they're going to set legislation, and they're going to, it's going to cost taxpayers to put little wheels on their license, and companies like mine are going to fucking come in and fucking work with you and get you all set up, and it's going to be great, right? But it's like, if you don't want government infringing on your business, then, like, do things in a responsible way that make you money, that bring your customers back year after year, and that you're not a nuisance on your community. And we won't be in the mess that we are with 606 right now. Yeah. And that's why I've kind of a softer approach to a little bit of this stuff. After talking to all these insurance companies, the supplemental providers, the politicians that have been involved in it, I just think it was a very reactionary bill that has popped up because of all the influx of COVID and everything that kind of happened with that. And I'm just having Adam on the show too and talking to him. I don't think he was really twisting his mustache to, like, get operators, because the guy's got a livery himself. So, I mean, as I said in the beginning of the show, I'd love to have Senator Garcia on and find out what the thought process was behind the insurance portion of this, so we could hear it straight from the senator's mouth herself. So I don't know, maybe we shoot an email. Yeah, well, great.
We're coming to the end of the show, and Maya, do you have any last thoughts on any of this? Anything to leave the listeners?
I'm still working with Peggy Matthews. We are trying to raise funds to try and either get an injunction on the bill to try and get some relief for some of the operators. There is a GoFundMe on your page, I believe. And if you want to donate to that, we have a threshold we have to meet. I think we're going to wait and see. We've reached out to some manufacturers, Yamaha, AWA, and they're kind of seeing if they can do a legislative approach first, but I don't have a lot of hope for that. Session's over. So if you are interested in helping, there's a link on the website, on the Facebook page.
I'll put it in the show notes too. Yeah. All right. And how can people get a hold of you if they have any questions or want to?
My website is My website's under construction, but I can be reached at my email, and I'll get that to Greg so he can post that on the page. It's Onboard Consulting LLC MWS@gmail.
You're not building it on Wix, are you?
No, I have somebody doing it for me, Kevin. Thank you. No, I'm doing it on Canva.
On
I busted out my Canva.
On Homestead, what's that? Angel Fire sites?
GeoCities.
GeoCities.
All right, guys. Thank you as always. Keep it awkward.
Thanks, guys.